loud. And you all probably got the little funny thing on your screen, right? Said, and then you got to hit got it. So, well, listen, I'd like to welcome everyone. This is our very first really wellness roundtable. And many of you know who I am, which is why you're here. I'm Dr. Robert Rodich, and I have been doing wellness related things now for over 30 years, if you can believe it. So I was younger than all of my children when I started this. And in fact, by the end of this year, all of my children will be in their 40s, from 49 down to 40, all four of my boys. So it's one of those interesting times of life. And so in this year, and what we're going to share today is really going to be about inflammation. Now, anybody that one of this, and I'm sure my son Jason may eventually tune in and he may hear this, but about 6, 7, 8 months ago, he calls me and he says, "Hey, Dad, can you check me out?" And of course, everybody who's on tonight knows that I can do this from just hearing somebody's voice. And I said, "Sure, what's going on?" "Well, I've got a kind of an ache here and I've got this going on there and everything." And I said, "Well, Jason, you're 46 and a half. Um, you're probably starting to get some aches and pains that some of us take for granted. In fact, Laura and I, sometimes when we get up in the morning and we say, okay, on a scale of 0 to 10, how are we doing today?" And, it's part of life. But the beautiful thing is that, again, literally all of us are believers. We are going to learn how to turn this thing around. Now, I'm going to be speaking in general terms on inflammation, but listen, toward the end, especially when we get to the point where, we're going to turn the record part off. If the Lord gives you any kind of a revelation, anything you want to share with anybody, this is going to be that opportunity, because we want this to be something that is going to release healing and health to the entire body of Christ, even if it's, got to be something supernatural that the world thinks is completely wacky. I don't care. It's time for radical things to happen. And that's what we're all seeking after. And so I would encourage each and every one of you to realize who you are and to step into heaven, and just say, hey, all you guys that were doctors and healers and whatever, partner with me. We want to have some answers here about things. Well, I recently came across an article. In fact, it's really funny because many of us think that our phones aren't listening to us. But, Laura and I very often will be sitting on the back porch and just visiting about things. And all of a sudden, the next day, there'll be like 5 articles on whatever we're talking about. And it's like, how did they know to send me an abstract on the herpes virus, stuff like that. And so all of a sudden, this article comes in where these researchers, and this particular group of researchers, they were just going to look at statistics alone, and they tried to find this, amongst all diseases that were registered at the CDC and wherever they register all these things, they wanted to find out if there were any commonalities. And one commonality jumped out like off the charts, and it was inflammation. That one thing that 95% of all disease has in common is inflammation. Well, now I will tell you this up front. Inflammation is 1 or 2 steps away from the root problem. So that's why, if you're leaning toward becoming any kind of a practitioner, please choose a modality where you can be very specific and really try to go after a root problem. So can everybody agree with me on that? Because it's great to have relief. After I saw that alligator, I kind of got, or alligator, yeah, it was an alligator, because I always get alligators and crocodiles. It shows I'm from the Midwest. I don't know what I'm talking about, but I got, I started getting a headache, and I thought, why am I getting a headache? Just because I'm, next to this big lizard. So yeah, okay, so I go take some Tylenol. But does that really solve why my head is hurting? And the answer to that is no. Well, I played 18 holes of golf, and, compared to the professionals, I hit about 15 to 18 more strokes in my round. Well, what that's doing is that's jerking my back, jerking my neck. Well, probably what I did is I threw a vertebrae out in my back, which usually happens every Thursday. So that's just part of what goes through. Well, but taking a Tylenol would simply be doing something to mask the symptom, obviously. So where, more often than not, do we find inflammation? In the organs, in the arteries. That's one reason why, the doctors, they run around, the medical doctors, especially the cardiologists, and they're so worried about what your cholesterol levels are. I'm sorry, but that is extreme ignorance, because what cholesterol does, as it's made by the liver, is patch an area of a vein and artery most of the time that's already becoming brittle and compromised. So something else is going on behind the scenes, but your arteries can be affected by inflammation. How many of us know that joints and bones can be affected by inflammation? They call it arthritis, osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis. And of course, the itis part simply means that it's an inflammation. The tissues, the skin can have inflammation. The electronic systems of our bodies can be subject to inflammation. And even our hormonal functions can be subject to inflammation. Now, what does this look like? Hypothyroid, hyperthyroid, insulin resistance, all inflammation. So I sat down and I thought, okay, and this isn't going to be comprehensive, guys and gals, but some of the causes we know that are pretty close to the roots are parasites. Now, that's a really interesting topic, because with this whole wacky virus thing that's been going around, a lot of people found out that they could use ivermectin to help and different things. Well, why would ivermectin help? And I'm going to open this up to a little discussion, because we've got a nice, size group tonight, but it's not so large that like 50 people are going to talk. But why do you think that ivermectin would help with a virus or something they're calling a virus? Does anybody have any ideas? Pamela, go ahead. Just unmute yourself.
Yes, because ivermectin kills parasites.
Right. It
And
does.
a virus, in my understanding, the virus is a parasite. A parasite is really what is triggers all these so-called diseases, viruses, because they're in our bodies. I don't know what are the good ones and what are the bad ones, but we have to get rid of the parasites, and ivermectin does that.
Right. Well, and it does it to a point. Certainly, we know that. Well,
Right.
thank you for your input. Well, correct answer. And you might want to go ahead and mute yourself again if you don't mind. When I first started testing people that had this particular virus, there are virus reflexes in the body and the testing mechanism that I use. And I was getting a couple pulses from that. But what's interesting is that it was showing way, way more as a parasite. Now, to always say that a virus is a parasite, I mean, it could be, but maybe it's a hybrid of something. But we certainly know that whatever this was, it was created to be something that could be airborne, left on handrails or whatever, and picked up almost like you would a parasite. Well, parasites are a big deal. The one thing that I personally use that seems to be as wide spectrum as anything is food grade diatomaceous earth. So any of you who have ever done a program with me, you know that if you had parasites, we used the kind of light colored dirt stuff that you mixed into your water. Wasn't that fun? And we did it for 3 months, or if you're in the process, you're still doing it. Okay. Well, that's very wide spectrum. There's also several products. I know that Standard Process has one called Zymex, ZYMEX, Roman numeral 2, that if you take 2 capsules 3 times a day for 3 months in between meals, which means couple hours in between each side would be the safest way to do it. Also is very devastating against parasites. And to me, those are two of the biggest things that I know of that will address them. Now you say, well, why wouldn't I use fenbendazole or ivermectin? Well, I'm not saying I wouldn't use them. One of the first things that I did when everybody was getting this most recent virus was I went over to Tractor Supply and got a couple of tubes of the horse ivermectin because they wouldn't let you get it. And being the math whiz that I am, I figured out, well, if it's a 2,000-pound horse or 3,000 and the tube's this long, it would take about that much on my fingertip. And so I took it a couple of times a day. And, when other people were getting sick, I wasn't getting sick. And when I finally did get it, it lasted like a day and a half with like zero symptoms. I think I was just a little bit tired and that was it. And so it's interesting how, but there's more. And that's why I always tell people, look, it is really important to know what weapons we have in our arsenal. Always very important to know that. But it's just as important of to know what to use and when and for how long. And that's sometimes why we need help. Okay. And so those of you that do spiritual counseling and things like that, I mean, these are things that kind of go across the board, and so very important. Another thing that can really cause a lot of inflammation, believe it or not, is food additives. Have you ever read the labels on some of the things that even are claiming to be health foods? There are things in some of that, you know, I don't even know what they are, half of them. And, we all, I think we probably, most of us that are here this evening know about the corn syrup stuff that they use as sweetener and in everything. But there's just so many things. I know I was personally shocked and, because we're kind of like the frog in the water. They throw us in when it's cold and then the flame just keeps getting warmer and warmer and we don't realize what's going on until finally we're boiling and then it's too late. Well, we were looking at some pictures, my wife and I, of folks back in the 70s. And I don't mean to be offensive to anyone, but we couldn't hardly find anybody that was overweight. And so what changed? Well, food additives are a big deal. And let me just say this. If for no other reason that these additives are in the things that are boxed up, even if they call them very healthy and wholesome, it's so that we'll stay addicted to them and keep going back to their product. And I think everybody agrees on that. The different kinds of sugars, you know, people say, well, I use stevia, and I do actually use stevia in a lot of stuff, but there's all kinds of different sugars, and there's agave and, all different kinds of things. But, some of the stuff is just as bad as high fructose corn syrup. And I always forget which one it is because Laura's way more knowledgeable than I am because there's the yellow package of the stuff that's really bad for you, the sweeteners, and then the pink one I guess isn't so bad, but it's not very good. So you know what? I just either use honey or I use stevia, and then that's it. But those are things that can really cause a lot of inflammation. Now, in my practice, I do not address diseases, and sometimes people get mad at me because they want to send me all their tests that they get from doctors. Well, if you come to me for a consultation, I want to know if you've got a pancreatic problem, of course. But what I'm doing is simply finding the things that somehow, some way you should be getting in your diet, but you're not. And then if there's something that maybe crosses the line and it's really a big irritation to your system, we do have quite a number of things that we can draw from to give you a little bit of help as you're getting into your program. And the hope is that as we're doing all the heavy spiritual work, that this stuff is going to start working in our body more and more. And so, but we really need to learn to rely on natural things whenever possible. Now, I know that this could probably get some folks into a lot of trouble, but I think that to a point, the medical establishment suffers from their own paradigm in that they think that the only thing that can ever help somebody has to come from big pharma. And if you start looking at some of the ingredients that are in that, like for instance, if they did this, and they don't, but let's say you went to your local Whole Foods or something, and you bought a jar of honey. But with every jar would come the little paper pasted to it, and it would say, this is pure honey from such and such and whatever. Well, anytime you get a drug, you unfold this sheet and it's bigger than my computer. And it's got all these things that could, like it's kind of like, okay, we're giving you this because you have IBS or you have Crohn's, but you could die from internal bleeding, you could die from a heart attack, you could have a stroke. And it's like they spend the first 10 minutes telling you, I'm sorry, 10 seconds in the commercial telling you how great it is. And then the next 20 or even 50, if it's a 1 minute commercial, telling you how many ways that you might die. Well, I remember years ago that for about, I think it was about a 10-day period, that all of the doctors in Israel went on strike, and it was really shocking. But in that particular time frame, about 90% less people passed away than when they were actually doing their job. Now, I don't know how to even relate to that, but that's kind of scary, you know. So we're going to live longer if the doctors just don't do anything. Wow. Now, I'm sure there's different aspects to that. Well, one of the things that I noticed, and I'm kind of a Western movie buff, so, I've probably seen every John Wayne movie 15 times, and, a lot of the other great Western heroes, Gary Cooper and stuff like that. But the ones, some of them, Randolph Scott ones especially, were done in very high cinematic value, and some of them are in color. Well, you didn't see those funny white streaks in the sky that make checkerboards and have all those really weird, like rainbow, almost like dirty oil laying on the ground rainbows in the sky in any of those movies. But you go outside on any given day and it's like when is the X and O going to come in? You know what I mean? And so we know what those are. But here's my question. What are they really? And what are they trying to do to us? Okay. I'm not sure I'm going to even probably comment on that, but that's for no other reason. We need to get into heaven for that. Now, I spoke a moment ago about all of these new viruses popping up, but folks, there have always been viruses. There have always been parasites. There have always been things that have hurt people. But through the years, every culture has learned how to deal with a lot of these things. And but the point is, they all cause inflammation. Now, one of the other things that I want to say that I would encourage people to do, I am not a dietitian, so I'm only going to give you information that I've learned as a human being. But even some of the fruits and vegetables that we eat are high in something called oxalates. Well, guess who's had more than his share of kidney stones in his life? Most kidney stones are made from oxalates. Well, I live in the southern United States, and of course, one of my favorite drinks is sweet tea. Or tea in general. And you can get kidney stones just from drinking a bunch of tea because it's very high in oxalates. You might want to take a look at the different things you eat and scrutinize all of your food and try to stay with things that are a little bit lower in oxalates, and also maybe do some research on, for instance, different kinds of potatoes that if you boil potatoes and then maybe mash them instead of bake them, I think it gets rid of oxalates by doing that. So those are little things that we just kind of pick up along the way, just in our course of human existence. But some things that are really, really inflammatory are the different oils that we use to cook with. And we need to be really careful with a lot of those oils. They break down in different ways. like recently I realized, and Laura and I, and some of you already know this, have been on what they call the carnivore diet. And if you know anything at all about the carnivore diet, you basically eat as much meat as you can. You can eat cheeses and fats and pork rinds and butter and heavy cream and all that kind of stuff, but you don't eat any vegetables, you don't eat any fruits, anything like that. Well, bless her heart, Laura's dropped a few pounds and I've dropped 20 when I was only trying to drop about 6. So I had to go back on some carbs, and which, like green beans and some peas and a few of the potatoes and things like that, which I've just started. But we went out just this past Sunday because she heard that there was a restaurant she'd been hearing good things about over across the border into Florida, because we live just, as a crow flies, maybe 10 minutes from Florida, really. It takes about 35 or 40 minutes to get there because the roads aren't, super straight getting there. And so I ordered the 2 combination catfish and shrimp, but they were breaded shrimp, and then French fries. Well, I had been eating some potatoes again, but man, I'm telling you, when I had those French fries, I could taste that oil in there. Whether it was peanut oil or whatever they cook it in. Maybe it's corn oil, but it just didn't taste right to me. So, you know, I know that we can't all go to restaurants that cook things in duck fat, but believe it or not, that's actually a really good thing to cook French fries in. So if you can find some duck fat somewhere, go for it. Or render your own lard, or render your own beef cracklins, or whatever they call those things, and then you've got some oil to work with. Now, another thing, and this is something that most people are surprised by, that really causes a lot of inflammation, is bottled water. Now, does anybody have any idea why bottled water would cause a great deal of inflammation? Go ahead, Mark.
As I understand, it's the particulate matter of the plastics within the actual water. So you're ingesting small parts of plastic, which is basically clogging up your system.
Exactly. Very good. Well, one of the things that they said, and I don't know why, is that it creates way too much estrogen from those particulates. And, you know, I know this is going to seem really cruel, but is it a wonder that people are losing track of what their gender is these days? Could some of it be because all anybody does is drink from bottled water? Now that would be really, a conspiracy theory thing. However, this is what I do know. They can make plastics that don't leach anything off, but they choose not to. Well, why did they choose not to? Why did they choose to put all those crazy things into Fruit Loops, and all the different types of cereals, and even things that are supposed to be like whole food type stuff? You read the labels and it's just not right. All right, so what are some of the solutions? Well, one of the solutions is that we can work pretty regularly on detoxing our liver. Now, there's different ways to detox the liver. The old-timey way was probably promoted most famously by a lady by the name of Hulda Clark, where you would drink at the end of drinking maybe a gallon or two of organic apple juice, you would drink like 6 or 8 ounces of olive oil mixed with either the squeezings of a half a grapefruit or a couple of lemons, and then you'd mix it up. And if you're really sharp, you get one of those really hard straws, and then you'd suck it down the back of your throat, because boy, if that combination ever got to your taste buds on your tongue, you just sit there and you start gagging like horribly from it. And then you lay on your side kind of in a fetal position, and then it's supposed to flush all this stuff out of your liver, and it may well do that. um, I personally prefer, because it tastes really good, just to get any kind of a brand of a detox tea. The one that's pretty available in most places is one called Yogi. And I don't really, it's got the little fat guru dude on the front with his hands like this. And some people, they don't, they think that maybe it's cursed or something. But, that's like Paul said, don't eat something if you think, it's going to bother somebody. But when I'm doing it in the privacy of my home, I just know it works. Okay. So that's one thing we can do. The other thing, of course, is to kill parasites. I've already told you about the food grade diatomaceous earth. The way that we take that is to take and make sure you get food grade, guys and gals, because there is a non-food grade that you like dust all over your plants. Probably it wouldn't kill you, but food grade means it's consumable by humans, obviously. And so you take rounded tablespoon, mix it into some room temperature water, and you chug it down, preferably in between meals. And but you have to do anything that relates to parasites for at least 3 months, because you've got to hit 3 hatching cycles of the parasites, because they go dormant and they become the most active at the full moon. And there are times of the week where I'm outside quite a bit. And it's really interesting because I'll watch people. And it's funny how a couple of days before the full moon, during the full moon, and a couple of days after, people drive like they're insane half the time. And then the rest of the month, it's like everything's cool and everybody smiles at each other and the road rage is way down. Well, the moon apparently in some way, and the alternative practitioners have known this going back into the, who knows, 1910s, 20s, 30s, whatever, that lunar cycles do have something to do with parasitical activity. And that's just the way that it is. There's nothing new age about it. It's just, like gravity. It's like science. Another thing that we can do is we can clear out our veins and arteries. Now, that doesn't necessarily get to the source of why our veins and arteries are being plugged up. That's why it's very helpful to have precise help from other people. But here's a product, and I'm hoping this will show. Some of you have taken this. It's called CircuFlow by Kroger Herb. If you take 3 of these 3 times a day on an empty stomach with, if you're using liquid aloe vera, maybe a couple of ounces in some juice, within 30 days, it'll clean out every major vein and artery in your body. About $30 on Amazon for it. The aloes, maybe another 10 or 12. I usually don't put any of my clients on it unless they're 80% or lower, because I scale everybody. 0 would be the worst and 10 would be the best. So if you're a 9 or 10, we'll just kind of keep watching you. But if you're a 9, it's going to be at least a year. So just call me up and we'll restart your program, because most of you probably want all your spiritual evaluation tests done anyway. So we'll just redo them at that time. But this stuff is miraculous. I can't even tell you the numbers of times, and probably unknown the numbers of lives that have been saved just from this product called CircuFlow. Now, it's from a company called Kroger Herb, but it's not spelled like the grocery store. It's Kroeger, Kroger Herb. Now, the next thing is, has anybody, and you can just do it by raising your hands because the group is just the right size for me to see everybody on my screen. But has anybody run into anybody that has had what they call long COVID, where the symptoms persist?
Mhm.
Well, this is where a medical doctor came in, and he said he was doing research and they found out that there's something in the body called nicotinic receptors.
Mm.
Okay. And Pamela, you may want to mute yourself just temporarily. And the nicotinic receptors somehow interact with the spike proteins more than they do with the other things that are necessary to keep your immune system strong. So unlike what the CDC said, which it said, oh my gosh, if you're a smoker, you're going to be just in like the upper level of morbidity for the, for COVID or whatever. Well, he started doing studies with his own clients and found out that the people that weren't getting sick were the smokers. And come to find out that because they're called nicotinic receptors, that if you take a nicotine patch and paste it to your body, that people that could barely walk into his office after wearing it for 24 hours were almost back to normal, because it was cutting off all these nefarious designs in the virus. And they were just getting better. And so I don't, if you go to Walmart or somewhere, you get them, they're like $30. And I think there's like 10 patches or something. So you wear them for 10 days. Let me tell you something. Nicotine itself is not addictive. It's all the other garbage that they put in the cigarettes that addicts you. Okay. So you're not going to go, oh, I've committed the unforgivable sin because I wore a nicotine patch for 10 days. That is just not going to be the case. Okay. So that's something there too. Now, something else that we found out early on in the process, and I'm trying to find the goodies here, is we found out that N-acetylcysteine, also known as NAC, and glycine are really, really good for people that were having lung problems. How many people would still be alive today if they hadn't thrown them on those ventilators? Okay. Well, there's also another side benefit of if you take 1,000 milligrams of each of these first thing in the morning, and my bottles are 1,000 milligrams each, and 1,000 milligrams at night, they also provide the body with great material to make glutathione. Now, what is so good about glutathione? It's a great antioxidant, but it also helps keep us younger. Okay. So the problem is, even if you get liposomal glutathione, it still doesn't do the job. Somehow glutathione is this weird thing that you have to give the body somehow the right components, and then it'll convert it into the right thing and send it to the right place. Well, apparently those two items can save a lot. So I've even started taking it. I didn't have time tonight because I just barely got home in time to get this going. But I even take it for headaches. I take it for, maybe when I get a little dehydrated out on the golf course on Thursdays, and then I take it, and it just kind of helps a lot of stuff is what I'm saying. So that's really, really good. Now, in the course of things, because I know our dear brother Dean is really interested in, as a lot of us are, in wellness practices. But I have, and this isn't something I discovered, but I will tell you that I did discover within a month of when COVID was attacking people, that boron was doing a great thing to try to I don't know what it did, but it was helping people. So I would tell people to take a pinch of boron, and I discovered that within a month of when it started going around for the first time, because I did a bunch of muscle testing and I had all this stuff laying out, and I just said, okay, try this, try this, try this. And you do it with trial and error. But there is a bath that people can soak in, because there's two problems going on out there. There's people that have had vaccinations, and I'm not really sure that even, say, other vaccinations are the way that they were 20 or 30 years ago. They could be a little bit more nefarious. And if that's the case, there may be things in there that we need to detoxify from. So I'm going to give you, since you're my very first group, I'm going to give you a formula. And that formula is, and these are all going to be 1/2 cups. Now, you would use a full cup if you had one of those big bathtubs, that are like you could fit 3 people in. We've got one of those in our master bath, and I don't think I've ever used it because I use the one in the guest bathroom that is the smaller one that I'm used to. So if you use the smaller one, it's a 1/2 cup of sodium bicarbonate, Arm & Hammer, whatever. I got to see if I can remember this. A 1/2 cup of 20 mule team borax, a 1/2 cup of Celtic sea salt, and a 1/2 cup of Epsom salt. Well, when you run it in there, you want to take a hot bath, soak in it for 30, 40 minutes. You got to get it as hot as you can stand. But you also, when you're in there, you got to take your hands and kind of make everything dissolve. It has been said by others, I can't back this up by any particular research that I've done, although I feel really good, especially if I get some of the Epsom salts in there that have been infused with essential oils. I always smell like a rose coming out. So that's always a nice, side effect, so to speak. But that has the ability to kind of disarm a lot of the things that seem to be floating around in people's systems these days. So there's a great thing to take a look at. Now, some months ago, almost a year ago, I was having an engagement with the Lord, and I said, Lord, I feel like I'm missing something. Now, many of you have heard this already, but he basically put me onto something that will address the herpes simplex virus, which a couple of days later, an abstract shows up in my phone of these medical doctors from Emory University in Atlanta or somewhere that were saying that herpes could be the silent killer and the root problem for many of the diseases that people face today. Well, I think isn't there one form of herpes that eventually can turn into shingles or something like that? You know, something related to that. Well, I got to turn these around, so you'll have to excuse me for fidgeting here a little bit. Sometimes they have them in stock, sometimes they don't. But this is chlorine dioxide, part A and part B in drops. The dosage for these is for 32 ounces of purified water. You take 7 drops of part A, 7 drops of part B, and you put it in a little plastic cup and you let it mix for about 3 or 4 minutes. And then it smells kind of bleachy, but I promise you it's not bleach. Once you feel like it's activated, you pour it into the 32 ounces of water, shake it up really good, let it be in a glass jar, please, because we just talked about the plastic, okay? And all of a sudden, before you know it, with 8 ounces a day, you're starting to kill the herpes. Now, from time to time, I get a client that's super sensitive and they get what is called the Herxheimer effect, which means it's really working, but you're getting sick. Well, you have a choice. You can either cut back and maybe start with 1 ounce a day and then 2 ounces and then 3 ounces and build up slowly, or you can just wait a few days because it usually passes. It just depends on what your level of discomfort is. You know, me, I don't like to feel bad at any time, but, you know, I just kind of tough it through a lot of the times. Well, chlorine dioxide, what this is designed for is backpackers to purify the water that they, you know, because you're not going to carry around. Wouldn't it be nice if the Walmart guy had his pallet of water and he followed you on the Appalachian Trail? Boy, that would be wonderful. And then you could just go get your estrogen laced bottled water from it. So, but this purifies the whole works. Also seems to work on herpes, but it could take 6 to 9 months. Okay. I've got a lot of people that at the end of 3 months, they're at a 9, but we really want to see people at a 10. Okay. Now, I hope you're taking notes too, so that if there's any questions, you know, when we end the recording, we're going to give everybody plenty of time because we've got a little family size group and it's just wonderful tonight. Another thing is a lot of people suffer from heart arrhythmias these days. Now, we're going to get into this with specificity next week. But let me just tell you that there is a product out there called L-citrulline, citrulline. And if you take 2 600 milligram tablets several hours apart, 3 or 4 times a day, it can really help balance out a fluttering heart. So we'll go into really depth about that next week, though. Has anybody, and do it by raising your hand. There you go. Okay. Mark's got it right there. Has anybody know, and do it by raising your hand, what a Rife machine is? RIFE. Okay. Well, we can use a Rife machine because it broadcasts frequencies into the body. Well, I've actually got mine connected to a computer sitting directly behind me, but because I've got the northern lights up, you can't see it. But when I was having a lot of problems with an anchor tooth up over here recently, that was almost, the tooth was trying to get infected actually. And it turned out it was from my sinuses, but we didn't know initially. So I ran all these programs and probably saved my tooth by running programs that related to dental issues on my Rife machine. And so the one that I prefer is from a company called Spooky 2. So it would be Spooky and then a 2. And I have their I think they're $600 or $700 unit that you can actually run 2 separate programs at the same time. And then it runs through your computer. And then at the end of it, it has these things where you can slap pads onto you, or you can buy this little tray and clip your fingernails, and it'll actually run through the fingernails. And because they came from you, you don't have to be on any of the pads. It's a little slower if you're not on the pads, but through quantum entanglement, I can go other places and, set it up to run 24 hours a day, and it's actually healing me through my fingernails through quantum entanglement. So isn't that cool? So, I mean, I think it is anyway. So another thing that I think that it would behoove some of us to do is, okay, we've tried everything that we know how to do. We're taking our supplements, and yes, let's be honest, if we really did journal things, we are better than we were. Let's be honest, we are better than we were, but we still know that things aren't right. Well, there's 2 factors to enter in. One is always the spiritual, and we're really trying to get on top of that, and we're going to have more and more information coming out about programming from the spirit realm that could be running in the background, but that's not our focus this evening. The other thing that we may have to do at some point is get on an elimination diet of some kind, okay? So if you're trying to trim down, if you're trying to feel better, I do this cautiously because I wouldn't want anybody to go on the carnivore diet without doing probably a month or 2 of just watching every video that's out there, because you've got to balance fat, you've got to balance sodium, potassium, magnesium, all kinds of things. Probably a better diet for most people would be keto, but you still need to balance your calories. So if a person is trying to lose weight, you still can't eat 5,000 calories a day just because it's a good diet and think that you're going to lose weight. Okay. I mean, that's just common sense. So you got to watch your calories. But if you want to really do something special, do your studying, set a couple of months aside. And this is what's interesting. At first, Laura and I thought on the carnivore diet that we would be, going broke, but actually, because I'm not eating cheese curls and potato chips and, all the snacky things, we can afford to go down and spend $130 for filet mignon if we want to, and just cut it into small steaks and have plenty to eat. And plus, you eat less. You just can't eat tons and tons of steak. So I would recommend to some people, at least, to do that for a couple of months and then gradually add like one thing in, like maybe have a salad. And then you see how you feel. And then the next thing might be a sweet potato. And then all of a sudden, got a lot of gas from that or something. Well, maybe we stay away from the sweet potato. So let's try green beans. Green beans are okay. Well, do that elimination diet in such a way so that you can always have a good portion of protein, and then find vegetables that are very complementary to your system. Now, everybody can do that safely, because honestly, unless, and I don't see anybody here tonight who I would say is in that category, but unless you're on your last leg, and that's in God's hands anyway, anybody could do this for a couple of months without doing any real danger to themselves. Now, who might be people that have this? Well, if you're on dialysis, that will require somebody with a lot more dietetic type information than me. But other than that, unless there's some really bizarre situation going on or something, that's life threatening, almost all of us could do this for a couple of months and then learn to just add the things back in. It's also helpful to know what your blood type is, because it seems that different blood types break foods down differently. So for instance, my wife is an O and I'm a B. Well, I kept complaining to her because we'd have chicken 6 or 7 times a week, and she loves chicken. And listen, I gotta be honest with you. I could eat Popeyes for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Okay. But chicken is really not good for me at all. And then if you throw in a lot of the things that they juice into the meat before they cook it to make it taste better, Oh my gosh, MSG sends me, I don't even know where I end up half the time, some other dimension or realm. So, we all have to, but that's what an elimination diet does. So learn about your blood type, learn about things, because everything that we want to do, both as believers and both as people that are interested in health, is we want to be empowered. At the end of the day, and I don't want to be judgmental because I know some of the greatest healing evangelists had health issues in their lifetime. But it's not, to me, it just doesn't seem like a great testimony that I'm praying for somebody to be healed when I look like I'm going to pass out and slide under the pew. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. So, let's do our due diligence there. And if ever there was a time to be alive that you can, I mean, I just Google everything now. Hey, Google, what's the weather today? Hey, Google, what does this word really mean? I mean, it's everything. I do it all the time and it's at our fingertips. There's no excuse. Hey, Google, show me for the O blood type. What is the eat for your type diet? And then the whole sheet is just printed out and you just print it on your computer, on your printer, and it'll tell you everything you're supposed to eat and not eat. So it's never been easier, in my opinion, at least. So, and then there is one solution that doesn't seem to relate to any of this other stuff. But my wife Laura is always looking at unique things on YouTube. And one of the things she came across was a British physician who was taking people that were really in bad health. I mean, there's no other way to put it. Overweight, diabetes, heart conditions, and I think there was maybe 25 or 30 people. And he said, we're going to start slow, but we're going to get to where we can walk 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. Across the board, people were 80% better just doing that. What can I say? Now, does that solve everything? No, it doesn't. So, perchance, before I end the recording part, but perchance, and sorry, I can't see the chat. So if anybody's asking me any questions, I guess I'll go over here now and see. Pamela asked about glycine. It's not glycerin, though, not that you but it's L-glycine. I think it's an amino acid. And acetylcysteine is NAC. Well, now oregano oil does help with herpes. Some of us can't tolerate oregano oil real well. So that's part of the problem. And so I can drink a whole gallon of the chlorine dioxide water in a day if I have to. Might I get a little bit of a reaction from it? Maybe, but it's a lot easier to do that way. But does anybody have anything that they want to share with us? Maybe an old home remedy or something that you just know from your studies about something that might be good for a particular type of inflammation. So if you do, just we're probably small enough that you could just unmute yourself. If we start talking over each other, I'll just start calling on people. Dean?
Doc, may I jump in?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, you got me going on the diatomaceous earth, and I enjoyed it for about 6 months. And then I went to a parasite cleanse that's a pill, and I put it in the chat. I've been using this. For me, it's a lot better just taking a pill versus swallowing dirt.
Okay.
That's just me, but that was something that has helped me quite a bit.
Well, wonderful. And we appreciate that because, again, what we want to do is we want to develop a wellness group and a wellness family because, okay, let's all have a little bit of smiling on our faces, but we've all been through the noni juice as being the next thing that was going to, take us to heaven. And, and this next product and that next product. And maybe either fortunately or unfortunately, I can test them all. And when I don't see people's numbers being bumped up, maybe there's a backdoor way that it works, but but you got to join this, multi-level marketing group, and then they put pressure on you. And it's like, I'm sorry, but I'm having trouble sometimes getting back to my people which I used to be able to do it almost in the same day. Now it's taken 2 or 3 days, which is good. I like being busy, but I don't have the time to sort through all this kind of stuff. So excellent. Leave that up for a little bit, because if that really works, that would be a lot better for most people. And Dean, maybe you could even just take a picture of that and send it to me as a text, because I know you've got it is in your, my number in your phone. And I can definitely order some of that in, and then I can test it. And I can say, yes, this is, because here's the way my testing works. Some of you know about this and some of you don't. Is we score everything from a 0 to a 10. There are reflexes all over the body that correlate to certain issues. Like, the heart reflex is right there, thyroid right here, okay? Well, the parasite reflex is actually, and you can't really see this because it's going to look opposite on the screen, but is on your left side where the transverse colon attaches to the descending colon. It's right in that little curve down where the parasite reflex is underneath the left rib. Well, if I pulse you, well, actually, I'm being pulsed in your place because I heard your voice. That's why I have clients from all over the planet now, and I appreciate them. But if you're a 3, I can take a product, put it right up to the parasite reflex, and if it only takes it to a 5, well, that's not that good of a product. But if it takes it to an 8, 9, or 10, then it's got some potential. Now, could other things work in a backdoor fashion? Yes, but it's interesting that the stuff that cleans out the veins and arteries, if I pulsed you and you were a 3, and all of a sudden I put this up to and I'm sorry, I'm hitting my microphone here, but I put it up to the carotid artery, which you can't see because my background is kind of blurring it out, but you can see the lid. And I pulse and it goes to a 10, that tells me this is a superior product. So I have tested thousands and thousands of product against clients over the last 3 decades to find out which ones are the very best. And I have a group that's also affordable because not everybody's floating in money. Okay. So, yeah, I could tell you to always use standard process or biotics, but RNA from piping rock is $20 for a bottle. And from standard process, it's like 50 for 90. Well, by the time you do that 5 or 6 times, that's 2 car payments, So, I try to work with everybody, but still have things that work. So, any other comments or maybe even home remedies for something? Yes, Anne.
I actually have a question for you and for the group. I have damage from ibuprofen that I had to take for a year and then I had back surgery because I was laying down and not sitting up. It wasn't going down into my stomach, but it was sort of sitting in my esophagus. I couldn't feel it because it was numbing. And so I ended up with terrible asthma. They've got the asthma under control with medication, not the way I like to do things holistically, but we got to the bottom of it. I have burned esophagus and the opening to the stomach. And I'm wondering, does anybody have any health remedies?
Well, I would personally recommend that instead of taking the really concentrated aloe vera that maybe you'd go to Walmart and get, it's from the Rio Grande Valley of Texas, but it's more of a liquid aloe, and maybe mix a couple of ounces into a really good juice. And
I'm actually filleting my own aloe right now.
okay.
I learned how to fillet it, so that's what I've been doing.
So get it to a point where you can slowly sip an amount, especially in between meals where there's nothing there. And I don't know, would it reverse the situation if you lay down, or maybe you were in an easy chair, and that type of thing? But it's going to take time. And if there's scarring there, it's possible that it won't completely undo it. But I'd have to do some research. But for instance, I know Standard Process has a product called Cyruta Plus that actually goes in and it softens and heals veins and arteries. Is one, plus it acts as a natural antibiotic just because it does. But would something like that have the ability to maybe soften the scars? I wouldn't know, but I could probably test for something like that. So yeah, there's some real hope, but I think I would start with the aloe would be a great place to start, but be patient because, it's going to take time. It's going to take time.
I've been also doing slippery elm and marshmallow tea because I had read about the healing and my body likes it. So I'm been also doing that.
You're not going to hurt yourself with anything like that. Let me tell you. Um, the other thing that it might be helpful at some point might to have a test to see what your parasite index is, and here's why. Anywhere in the body, whether it's a bone, a tissue, veins and arteries, where there's a weakness, seemingly obscure parasites love to go into that area because it doesn't have the resonant strength that the rest of your body does. So it will go to where there's weaknesses. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if there was some, little parasitical activity even within some of the scars. So those kinds of things can happen. So anyone else with maybe a home remedy or any comments on? Go ahead, Mark, please. And then Faith after Mark. I saw his hand first, so we'll have Faith in a moment.
I was just going to ask, when the event that happened in 2020 came out, I think he's Professor Zelensky came out with the Zelensky protocol, and he talked about vitamin C, vitamin D, quercetin, and I think there was and ivermectin if you can afford it. And I've just been finding that if I take quercetin, now I'm not sure what the benefit is, but I'm finding that quercetin seems to be very good at sort of bringing down inflammation in me and just bringing overall health. So I was just curious of your comments on that.
It's a very good product. And that isn't something that when I first started in this, maybe it existed, but it's been a recent development, at least in my understanding and in that I've come across it. But like, for instance, you could probably throw a high quality quercetin in when you're taking your 1,000 milligrams of NAC and glycine at the same time. And they likely would work together to a point synergistically. So yeah, very anti-inflammatory. And another thing is that we need to make sure that we're getting enough salt. Now, when I say salt, I'm not talking about table salt. I'm talking about like sea salt, Himalayan salt, things like that too, because what do they used to cure out meat and preserve meat with? Salt, right? That's what the people going across the old West did. So Faith, you had a comment or something you'd like to interject?
I was just gonna say one of the things that I use for to help with inflammation is like turmeric.
Yes.
But I drink turmeric tea, or actually just mix the natural turmeric in a little bit of water and drink that. And then I started to do like 2 cloves a day, just chew on that first thing in the morning on an empty stomach.
Yes. Now, cloves will give you a nice little buzz. I say that very tongue in cheek, but I've used cloves before when I've had like a toothache or something like that. And man, I'll tell you what, that stuff really
It does
works.
help, yes.
And
But
now, go ahead.
I was gonna say I like that little buzz actually too.
Well, there is a really nice product. I've been using it for years and years. I think I did probably intend to write it down, but I didn't do it. But it's a very high quality concentrated turmeric, and it's called phenocane. And it's PHENOCANE. PHENOCANE. Years ago, when I was on my feet a lot, this lady that I ran into, she said, I don't know a lot about alternative stuff, but there's this product and it like takes your ankle joint pain away. And so I ordered some, and I had a day that I was really on my feet a lot. And then I noticed at the end of the day that my ankles, which were just hurting terribly, didn't hurt at all the whole day. And so the thing about turmeric is, everybody tries to get in on the bandwagon, just like they do with everything else. NAC, it doesn't matter. Just fill in the blank. Just make sure you get a really good quality. And it's always beneficial if it is more highly concentrated.
Right. Some of the things that we actually grow here at home, or I'm looking into some of the things that we used to use in Jamaica growing up, because everything for us was some sort of bush, as we call it. We didn't do medicine or things like medicine at all. Everything we have a bush. The latest one is called guinea hen weed. That's also supposed to be good for cancer, fighting cancer, as well as inflammation as well. But I'm checking that out. So I'll let you know how that works.
Wonderful. Well, see, this is the very type of thing of why we need to have our wellness family develop. Because, for instance, maybe from some of your family, they could send you samples if they would not stop it, in the across the border, or if somebody comes to visit. And then, it only takes like one capsule of anything if it's in a powder, or even if it's a ground herbs, for me to test, as long as I know what it is. And
Okay.
so, for instance, if you're able to be, because we're going to try to do this at 7 p.m. Central, the first Thursday of every month, maybe you could talk to some of the folks back home and see if people because there's a lot of people, even people in the ministry, that are suffering with atrial fibrillation and with all kinds of missed heartbeats. And so maybe see what some of the herbalists would do. And if nothing else, we're going to certainly make time for you either next month, or if you can't be on or you miss it or something, doesn't mean we won't give you time the following month when you're back on. Because this is the kind of thing we're trying to develop a roundtable, because we want to share with each other.
Okay.
Much is probably stuff from Australia. I
Yeah.
mean, I believe that's your homeland, isn't it? And yeah, and that could benefit us, but it never gets to us. Like, for instance, everybody's heard what echinacea can do, right? It's like, natural thing, kind of natural antibiotic. But what most people don't know, the way that you test the quality is you put some on your tongue, and if it doesn't burn almost like a real deep menthol, then it's garbage. Okay, so it should almost burn your tongue off with the feeling of like menthol. And it's kind of a buzz at the same time too. So so that there's these little things that we need to be sharing with one another. Pamela.
Okay, two things. One, I have a question because you have wisdom here in these areas like salt, okay? Like I've been taking in the morning like about half a teaspoon of salt, like like real salt, real salt, okay? Like in Utah, here in Utah, they have real salt that has the minerals and stuff in it. So I've been putting a little bit of that in with a little bit of water, and I drink it in the morning and I drink it at night. And I do that because my bladder, I all the time, I have more going out than I put in, okay? So that stops that. And what I was told is that it causes your body to hold the liquids and hold the nutrients in so that it gets into your cells. Okay.
I believe that is true. I believe that
And
is.
so is that harmful to my kidneys or anything like that with that doing that?
Well, my answer to that would be it's never going to be harmful to your kidneys unless you're already on dialysis or something.
No. Yeah.
And then it probably really wouldn't be harmful. But, at that point, okay, in a way, we have to be honest about who we are. We're amateurs in compared to those that are trained professionals. We don't want to give somebody an idea and say, hey, just take a half a teaspoon of salt. Even if it would cure them completely, we're not in a position to be able to do that. But everything you said is correct. And if anybody is, you hear these doctors, oh, watch your salt intake, watch your salt intake. Well, for one thing, that's why we're all dying.
Right.
Okay, I'm not in that group because I've got another 330 years left. But anyway, some of you know what that refers to. But anyway, if you just balance your potassium with it, and many of you know, I don't have it here. I'd have to actually get up and walk over to my little desk on the side. But there's a wonderful product that you get from a company called crampaid.com. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
cramp with a K, KRAMPADE.com. It's about half the price if you get their bundle package of this powdered sports drinks mix. Well, one scoop is 2,000 milligrams of potassium. Well, most people probably only need about 1,000 a day, in
Mm-hmm.
addition to what they're getting from their food. I happen to need 2. Well, guess what? My blood pressure never goes up high like it used to when I was on a no sodium diet because I'm taking the right amount of potassium. And here's what's really interesting. You know, I'm a senior, obviously, and my kids just reminded me of that, even though I ragged them a little bit about turning 47, my twins yesterday. And but anyway, as a senior, we have, you know, Medicare. So we have a yearly thing, and the doctor likes to do all this blood work and everything. So I purposely took 2,000 milligrams a day of potassium. I took probably the equivalent of 3/4 of a table or teaspoon, not tablespoon, teaspoon of the Himalayan salt. I was dead center in all of the parameters of everything. So wait a minute. If I'm taking 2,000 and I'm still right in the middle, how is that harming me? Now, those of you, and of course, Pamela, you would know this if I share this with you, but even our own government says we need 4.6 grams, which is 4,600 milligrams of potassium in our diet every day. Anybody have any idea what the average American diet actually takes in and therefore you're absorbing, even in the best case scenario? The range is between 900 and 1,200 milligrams. Okay, so if I'm 3,000 milligrams short for 30 or 40 years, is it any wonder that Alzheimer's and neuromuscular diseases and all that kind of stuff, they can't say with any certainty that things like that don't have some component in all of these diseases that are showing up in people today. But yet, when we were eating more healthy, somehow the spinach had it in it naturally. All right. If you had a cup of spinach when you were a kid, so let's say in 1960, when I was 7 years old, I had a cup of spinach and I hated spinach. I didn't know you could have it like as a part of salad because we weren't that sophisticated in those days. So I had a cup of spinach. It takes 50 cups of spinach today grown the best possible way to equal 1 cup of spinach in 1960. Oh my goodness. Carrots are the same way. Everything's the same way. We have depleted soil. Not only that, can you keep putting chemicals in the ground and somehow expect healthful things to come out of it? I mean, at some point, sanity has to rise to the top with this stuff. And that's why we have each other. And that's why we hope to build this group. Sandra.
No, I'm not done.
Oh, you're not done. Okay, go ahead.
I had one more. No, I had one more thing I wanted to say. It was like, I've been taking glutathione since, well, a year ago. I knew that it was good, and I did the IV drips and stuff like that, but I came across, and it's a product, okay? But what I found out about glutathione is my body loves it. And after the 4th month, my brain, it was like brain fog just lifted off my head, and I had vitality. I had natural energy in my, and I still do, okay? And I turned 70 in June, and I'm getting younger, okay? I am all about de-aging on the inside out, okay? But what I'm just saying that it's the process, it's the delivery process of the glutathione that, they know how important it is for our body, but it's how it gets into our body, the delivery system. And so I have access to something like that. That's amazing.
And it makes you wonder if the raw components used to be in a lot of our ancestors, things that they grew because the soil was more complete. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so, okay. So Sandra, now.
I just wanted to agree with you on the salt, and we actually don't realize, they tell us not to eat salt and everything, but how very important it is. It causes, they call it a hyponatremia, but it causes confusion. And you think you're doing the best thing for your body by cutting back on salt or high blood pressure and all this stuff, but it causes confusion and death if it's not, because it has to be between 135 in your readings, and you drop below 122, it's to the hospital. Weakness, seizures, all these confusions. So the salt is still very important.
Yeah, it really is. And like I said, if you're ever in doubt, just, take 1,000 milligrams or 2,000 milligrams of potassium. Now, what I do with the potassium is a balance to a lot of things, because I take anywhere from maybe about 500 to 1,000 milligrams of magnesium as well a day. I usually don't take calcium ever, because we're getting hit with calcium from almost every, angle. So we don't really need to worry too much about calcium unless there's a specific disorder that requires it. But I made myself a little funnel out of just regular 8.5 by 11 paper and cut it up. And I take my little scoop, put a half in, put it in. I actually like the plastic bottles that Powerade and Gatorade are made in, but I don't like Powerade or Gatorade, so I dump them out. I use those bottles. I put this in, go to the fridge where I have the special filtered water, fill it up, shake it up, and I make sure I get through both of those a day, plus all the other water and liquids that I drink. And that's how you do this kind of stuff. You try to combine things whenever possible. So for instance, if you need 8 ounces of chlorine dioxide water a day to address herpes, well, just pour 8 ounces into your Powerade bottle, fill it up the rest way with water, throw your potassium in, and you've killed 2 birds with 1 stone. I mean, who says we can't do that? And nothing that we're talking about here is going to cause anybody to, jump off a cliff or, just be way, way, way out there. We're talking about just common sense stuff. And let me just say, and then I'm probably going to definitely allow a little bit more visiting here in a couple of minutes, but I'm going to go ahead and cut the recording here in a minute. But several years ago, when I was in Raleigh, North Carolina, a buddy of mine thought I might be interested because they had opened in the local museum. And I don't recall whether it was NC State's museum or just something that was in Raleigh in general, but it was an apothecary shop from about 1910. Now, things don't usually grab me and you don't see my jaw dropping very often. But when I walked in there, I almost fainted. It was like walking into Whole Foods or something like that. Echinacea, golden seal, ipecac, all these herbs and different things like that. It was an apothecary shop, but yet it was all the stuff that we still have access to today. But so we know the whole story of how things got off of natural healing and how they got to where we are today. But I thought, oh my Lord, Jesus, how far have we fallen when you have given us these things in nature? And if the folks that are trying to make so much money in so many different ways would have put even a smidgen of effort into researching things, probably there would be 80% less diseases going on in the world today, because they could have put all of the resources, their technology. But you know what? If you read the Georgia Guidestones, their goal is to have 90% of the people dead anyway, so that's why they didn't do it. What am I going to say? And I'm sorry if YouTube, if this makes YouTube disagrees with that, but I'm just thankful somebody did blow them up. So what can I say? So okay, let me go down. I'm going to see, and I've always got my good friend Mark to help me end this. And all of a sudden, the record mark did not show back up when I clicked off of the chat screen.
Okay, it says it's recording
says
currently.
pause. Okay, so you hit pause. Is that what you
Yep,
do?
you can hit pause